Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How's it going?
Hey, good evening tonight. Just looking forward to talking a little bit of soccer here. It's kind of fun to get all these previews going, a little bit of advanced speculation to the season. Last week we did it with Cavalry and this week we're kind of doing it with the Wild.
Yeah, we're going to dive into the Wild tonight. They have their very first ever game coming up next week against Vancouver Rise. Really excited to talk about that as well as a few other topics.
Yeah, and if you are a new listener to our podcast, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
We focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from Calgary's soccer community, all the way from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university, post-secondary, and professional levels.
And this week our topics will be, as we've already alluded to, we're going to talk about the Calgary Wild, and we're going to do a bit of a preview prior to their first ever match. We'll talk about Cavalry FC's first game of the year last week. We'll also have a couple other things to talk about, including our first segment on League One Alberta for the year. And we have an interview this week. Scott, who's our interview with?
Yeah, earlier today, you managed to speak to Lydia Bedford, head coach of the Calgary Wild. Asked her some questions kind of about how preseason has gone and her thoughts on the upcoming game against Vancouver.
So I think that's probably a good segue. Let's just get into talking about the Calgary Wild in their first ever game.
This is Lydia Bedford, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So, Scott, it seems like it's been long in the works, but it's finally going to happen here. We're gonna see the Calgary Wild's first game Wednesday night. They're playing Vancouver Rise.
Yeah, still kind of some time to wait, but as Lydia Bedford said in the interview that we're going to run later, it's like preparing for Christmas morning. I can definitely agree with her on that point. It's been a long run since the Wild was announced, I think a little over a year ago, and it's been coming piece by piece. The roster has been built throughout the last couple of months, and it's finally here. The NSL is going to kick off, and the Calgary Wild is going to take on Vancouver at BC Place in front of what promises to be a very big crowd.
We'll get to that in our interview with Lydia. But yes, it seems like the numbers for this game are looking really good. And if you are wondering about broadcasting information, the match is going to be at 8 p.m. and it's going to be on TSN, and it's also going to be on CBC Gem.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways to watch it. Obviously, we have a few more weeks to wait before we can watch the Wild in person. Their home opener is going to be on May 11th, which is Mother's Day. So perfect opportunity for families to head out to McMahon Stadium to watch Alberta's first professional soccer league play its first home game. But before that, the Wild is going to have a couple of games on the road. So everything kicks off next Wednesday.
All right, well, let's get to the interview that we did earlier today with Lydia Bedford, where she talks a bit more about how preseason's gone, and we just have a bit of a preview to the upcoming match, and we'll run that now. I just want to mention before we run the interview that there were a couple of audio drops on there, so I apologize for that. There was a couple times where we had a bit of a weak connection, so anyway, just bear that in mind when you're listening, but I think there are only maybe 2 or 3 of them. So enjoy the interview. I'd like to welcome Lydia Bedford back to the podcast. Lydia is the head coach of Calgary Wild FC, and they're going to start their season next week with their first match in Vancouver on Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining us again, Lydia.
Thank you for having me.
Preseason has pretty much wrapped up. It's been a longer preseason because it's been the first year of the team. How's everything gone? Any thoughts about what it was like to go for that length of time, and in general how it's gone?
Yeah, I think overall, just feel like we're in a really good place going into next week. Presenting to the players about what the journey over the next 10 weeks was going to look like, and it feels like that's happened really quickly, and at the same time, it feels like it's been quite a long time too. So it's hard to put into words, but I think what's been really pleasing is just seeing consistent progression throughout the whole of pre-season. And as we've come towards the end of our pre-season friendlies, really starting to see the togetherness of the group coming out on the pitch. And kind of the gritty performances that we've been going after.
Is there a different dynamic in camp when you have a brand new club that doesn't really have any incumbents? Does it change things a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think first and foremost, you're not walking as a coach into an environment that's, fully set up and ready to go. We talk about flying the plane as we build it, and that becomes quite a consistent theme. Like it's definitely a bigger challenge than walking into a well-oiled machine and, just thinking about the football and how you might develop that. There's lots of other bits that have crept in as we've gone through pre-season, but I think that's kind of part of the joy of the challenge of mapping all of those pieces together and keeping the football, at the foremost front of what we're thinking about as we're going through pre-season. But having, all brand new players in one environment is very unique. There's players that have completed the full 10 weeks. There's players that have been here for 2 weeks. There's players that have been here for one day. And you're trying to map that all together.
Has there been any challenges in preseason that you weren't really expecting? Like I can think of a couple things that would be challenges. Maybe you were expecting these, but just things like indoor only practices. It's a bit harder to arrange a friendly than it probably would be in because you basically have to get on a plane. Anything you didn't expect that you've had to deal with?
I think probably the main one has just been the nature of the access that we have to training facilities in Calgary. So, we're really fortunate to have access to the Macron Performance Centre, and we share that with Cavs. So we train after them, and that's brilliant from like a connection piece and, like building the soccer connections across the city. But so we've had to flex at times. And then, if there is a facility that's available, is it the right, facility for our players in that moment? So we've often trained Monday to Friday throughout preseason, and we've just had to manage the load-in within that. I think I'd also tie that in with, we've invested in, really good GPS systems as a club. But because we train indoors currently, we don't get great data from those machines. So we're having to work, slightly differently as a result of not having them. But, as a coach, it just really challenges you to think a little bit differently. I might have had an ideal schedule in my head, but the reality is I've got to create the best opportunity to progress our players in pre-season. So that's the mindset we've gone into it with.
When I look at the roster, I can see that there are a lot of players with pro experience. Do you think that having that level of knowledge of the pro game, is that going to provide a bit of an advantage for you in the earlier stages of the season?
I'd hope so. And I'd say that even, some of our younger players, they still bring great experience in their own right. So I think across our group, we're really pleased with the depth that we've managed to pull in. But certainly, players that have come in with more experience, the younger, less experienced players will always look and they, show their true professionalism through their actions and their behaviors on a day-to-day. And ours certainly have done that. So it's really nice to see actually, when people are sense checking for what's the right way to do things around here. Well, actually, when our more experienced players are leading that from the front and they're demonstrating it through their actions every day, that makes my life a lot easier because they start to set the culture. We've actually done a really, big piece of work on culture and story sharing across pre-season. Our more senior players definitely will add that experience and have helped to bring the group in the right direction as a result.
Have you named a captain yet, or is that something that's going to be announced soon? Or
So as a group, we decided that we would have a leadership group. We spoke to a number of the players around kind of the experiences that they'd had and whether that was best, coming from in the playing group, because the job of our leadership group is to represent the voice of our players and to also carry a little bit of that responsibility around, demonstrating how we act and behave and what good looks like. So our players went through a process where they were able to kind of self-nominate to say, look, I've got some really good qualities that I can bring to this group. And we had around 10 players that felt that they wanted to try and add that experience, which is great. Like, it's perfect as a coach when you've got that many players. We were able to bring that down to 4. So we've identified 4 players in our leadership group. They're Grace Stordy, who's a local Calgarian player, Janaea Robertson, who's based from Vancouver, and has come over to Calgary, and then 2 of our international players, Michaela Moore and Maggie Doherty Howard. So the four of them are a leadership group in their own right, and we'll name the captain from within that group from game to game, and we'll move it as we feel necessary to kind of help that will represent the group outwardly, but also inwardly, check and challenge each other and help to create that platform of communication with the coaching staff. So they're really good at feeding things back up to us as much as they are asking questions through the right channels so that we can help to do the right things to make sure the club's moving in a good direction.
So your first opponent is Vancouver next week. Any thoughts about that matchup? I'm not sure how much advanced knowledge you can get about your opponent at this point, but any particular thoughts about going into that first match?
I think the main feeling is excitement. It's like, working towards Christmas morning. And I said this to someone this morning, like, our players are really fortunate. There's 150 players that are within this league if everyone signs their full cap. So they're already one of the first 150 to compete in the NSL. But when you've put 10 weeks of work to pre-season, the biggest thing that we're looking for on Wednesday evening is a team performance that represents the hard work that we've put in across pre-season, because we all know that with football, sometimes the result won't go your way despite a positive performance. But the one thing that we want to hold ourselves to is that accountability around how we want to play on the pitch. So I think, the general feeling is excitement. The last I heard, there's already 10,000 people attending the game, which is just unbelievable for the first game in the league. And our players that in and enjoy it. And I think that's just going to bring even more excitement to the night.
Today it was announced that Sam Adekube and Charlie Trafford have joined the ownership group. What are your thoughts about having a couple of pros, one I guess recently retired and one still active, joining the project?
I think for us, or particularly for me as a coach coming in to Calgary and obviously trying to understand the lay of the land and, meet different people, it's always great to hear other people's experiences of playing here and to learn from what they've done. I actually sat down with Tommy a couple of weeks ago and I was picking his brain on how they traveled as a team. So I'm sure both of them will be able to add experience that will maybe just check and challenge my thought process as a coach. But for our players, it's also just really important to see how many people are getting behind this team, and the interest from both of them is, I guess, a great sign for how Calgary is getting behind this Wild team, and that's really exciting.
What would your message to fans of the club and what you'd like to tell them before the first match starts?
I think we're just, super grateful for all the support that we've been given so far. We were lucky to have some of the supporters group come down to one of our final friendlies, and we've ran a community day where a number of young players came in and were able to experience meeting our first team players. So we can feel the excitement supporting us. We really value the time and effort that they would have put in to get there, and everything we put out on the pitch, whether they're watching us remotely or in person, is to represent this city as best as we can and to show them what it means to put on the shirt and play for the badge. So it's going to be a great journey this season, and this is just the start. So whatever happens on Wednesday night, we'll bring our best performance and we're going to keep building. But we're just so excited to be able to get to McMahon on the 11th of May as well. And by that point, we'll be in the direction. So excited and very grateful for all the support we have.
Thanks again for doing the interview, and wish you all the best next week in Vancouver and, for the whole upcoming season. What do you think of the interview? And any particular comments, thoughts about what we discussed?
I thought it was interesting that they're going with a leadership group of 4 potential captains, and they're going to kind of cycle the captaincy through that group of 4. The players who she named as the leaders didn't really surprise me too much, but I did kind of expect that there would be a club captain, like a single individual captain. And it doesn't look like the Wild is going to do that, at least not at first.
Yeah, and it does seem to be a bit of a mix, right? Like Michaela Moore is an international veteran player. I fully expect that she's going to be a real leader on this team and particularly, marshaling the defense and that sort of thing. So certainly no surprise there. And then you look at the other players and Miggy Doherty Howard, I know she's a player that has a pretty good pedigree playing in the States. So I think it kind of made a lot of sense that I was expecting those two players. And then none of those names, I think, are, if you're going to pick four, are probably terribly surprising.
No, especially the first two you mentioned, Maggie Doherty Howard, obviously quite the pedigree coming from the NWSL, was with Angel City FC last year. And then Michaela Moore, like you mentioned, she's got 60 plus caps for New Zealand. So obviously one of the more experienced players on the team. Definitely expecting leadership roles from those two. And Grace Storty, local product, kind of a rookie in terms of her pro career. She played in Portugal last year, but I think that she's, the one who will be most familiar with the city and the fans and everything. So didn't really surprise me too much that those four players were announced, but it did surprise me that they're not going to have an out and out captain.
I think there's a couple players that are going to kind of all be honing in on watching. Are there any players on the roster that you're particularly interested in watching?
Well, I'm very curious to see who's going to be the starting goalkeeper, right? Like we've talked about that in the past. There's three to choose from. I feel like the starting number one role is going to be probably fought between Stephanie Bukovic and Jackie Burns. But I have to be honest, I haven't seen either of them play before, so I don't really have anything to judge. But based on their experience and the teams they've played with in the past, I would assume that they would edge local product Sarah Kelty-Dilling as the Wild's number one.
Mm-hmm. And we did post this to social media, the link. Jackie Burns was interviewed for the BBC last week, I think it was. And she talked about coming to Calgary as kind of giving her career a fresh start. And in that article, she basically seemed to suggest that, well, she thinks she's the number one keeper going into the season. So I guess we'll ultimately see on Wednesday night. For me, at least, I think that Maggie Doherty Howard is kind of, I think, the one player that, has a really interesting pedigree. But anyway, we don't really know too much about formations or anything like that, but that'll be something that maybe we can talk about after the first match. But
this is Marco Carducci, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, segueing toward talking about Cavalry, Jason. Last week, they lost their first game of the CPL season. Tough road trip to Hamilton to face Forge. Overall, it was a really intriguing and entertaining game, even though it only ended 1-0. Cavalry really came close toward the end, equalizing, but ultimately were unable to escape from Hamilton Stadium with a point.
The action was really fast and furious there at the end, and there were a couple excellent chances, but just couldn't quite put it past their keeper, who was, really on fire in that game, made some big saves. And there was also a couple other just close calls in general. But my perspective on this one is that going into Hamilton is probably one of the toughest matches you have all year. So no matter how good your team is, you can't expect them all. So I guess they showed reasonably well, and I guess you just take it from there and got the home opener here in another week. But I think it's obviously, whenever you lose, it's a bit disappointing, but it's a game where you can kind of accept maybe you didn't get a result.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Forge's goalkeeper, Jas Kalelat, had a phenomenal game. I think there were 3 saves that stuck out. One of them was probably save of the week in the CPL. I was a bit surprised to see him start. I thought Chris Kalongo was their main goalkeeper. Is he still? I think he's still with the club. But
I think so. And as far as I know, he is, yeah.
But I think, did Jas Kalelat start the final? I feel like he did.
I think he did. I if I remember this right, and I'm far from certain about this, they started the year with him and Kalongo kind of platooning, but I think as the season went on, I think he became more consistently the number one.
Yeah, well, he showed why in this game. He was deserved player of the game, and yeah, Cavalry couldn't find a solution to get a shot past him. But overall, I don't think Cavalry fans will be disappointed with the performance itself. It seemed like Cavalry is really continuing where they left off in 2024. Like, they look like they are a team that has gelled. I actually really like what we saw from the newcomers. Michael Baldissimo got subbed in the second half. He looks really comfortable in possession. Although, to be fair, he was playing really deep. He was playing just in front of the center backs, and with Forge down a man, he had a lot of space to work with. And by the way, I guess we could mention that Forge player Zane Bruno was sent off toward the end of the second half, which is partially why Cavalry had so much offense at the end of the game. But Michael Baldissimo, I liked what I saw from him. And then Kanija Elva got subbed in for his first CPL match. And then Mihail Gerasimenkov, he hit the post and also had a couple of good looks out on the left. So decent performance from Cavalry against a tough Forge team that has reinforced itself with some really strong signings. And I wouldn't let a 1-0 loss here worry me too much if I were a Cavs fan.
Agree. And by the way, I think Garabamesov, on his very first touch, he hit the post. I that would have been an interesting moment. I don't know if there's been a player on the team who on his first touch scored a goal, but that was pretty close.
Yeah. It was a nice shot. It was at the edge of the box, and I think it was a tough take, but he drilled it, and it hit the inside of the post too, so an inch to the left, and it would have been posted in, and that would have been quite a nice goal. So I think he's going to be one that Cavalry fans are going to be excited to see get some more playing time in the games to come.
Cavalry doesn't play a match this weekend, but their next match will be on Good Friday, the home opener against Vancouver FC, and that'll be on at 5 p.m. And we'll talk more about that one next week.
A very good Friday. And then, of course, they actually have another home game shortly afterward, right? They're going to be opening their Canadian Championship run against Edmonton Scottish, and I think that's been rescheduled to April 26th, I want to say.
That sounds about right. It wasn't moved up. One other point that you brought up here and you added to our list of things to talk about, Scott, the roster for Cavalry is not actually fully complete. I think there's still one more slot on that roster that's still available.
Yeah, Jason, I've been thinking of trying out for this position with Cavalry. I mean, it'd be good to be back on the pitch. Of course, I'm talking about Sarge, the Cavalry mascot. Spruce Meadows is hiring for someone to take on that role.
Yeah, that would be an interesting experience. Not something I've ever done, but it could be fun. I think if you got the right personality and you can tolerate confined spaces and being top heavy and managing that suit on a hot day, it could be a nice part-time job.
Well, yeah, but I've also heard that being a mascot is incredibly difficult and harder than it looks. And yeah, like you alluded to, the temperature in the big, heavy suit is quite a lot hotter than it is outside of it. And there's a lot of weight on your shoulders, so it can actually be really tiring. And of course, you've got to be energetic. You've got to keep the crowd going. But if that sounds like something you'd be into, reach out to Spruce Meadows because they are hiring for a new mascot.
My name is Mo Gander, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Okay, Scott, we're going to do our first League One Alberta segment for this year. The first of many, I'm sure, but there are just a couple bits of information that I thought worth passing along this week.
Yeah, there's some coaching changes and shuffling. And there's some exhibition and inter-squad matches coming up very soon. And the league itself, the first game of the season is actually just next weekend.
First match is going to be on Saturday, April 18th, when new club Rangers is going to go play BTB in Edmonton. So their season is really coming up quickly, and they are going to have some inter-squad matches this weekend, this Saturday afternoon. So if you want to check out what's going on with Rangers, I believe it's over at Weber Academy, their athletic park that they have out there. I think it's really close to Springbank Airport there somewhere.
Yeah, it's west of the city or just west of the city limits. But that's taking place Saturday. The women are playing at 2:40 p.m. and the men at 5:10. And then after that, of course, it's going to take a while before you can watch League One action in Calgary, because after Rangers travels to Edmonton next weekend, there are no matches until May, which is kind of interesting.
So we did get a couple of coaching updates from the Blizzard here in the last day or two. So some familiar faces and a couple of new ones.
Yes, on the men's side, Blizzard is going to be coached by Ramon Mifflin again, and Moel Gandor is going to be his assistant. But he told you today, Jason, he confirmed that he is going to play. So, former podcast guest Moel Gandor is not hanging up the cleats yet. He's still going to be a League One player this season. And then on the women's side, they have a new head coach. Diogo Raposo is kind of passing on the reins to Cedric Bovon, who has been his assistant in the past. I actually know Cedric personally. We went to high school together. He's a few years older than me, but it's neat to see his name connected with the League One team, because I know that he's been coaching a lot in the last decade or so.
We'll keep everyone posted as we find out more information about players that are going to get signed and coaches over the next little bit, because I'm guessing that by the time we're going to record our next episode, there will be many announcements, because it's creeping up on us here. Yeah, the first match will be next weekend, and then a week or so later, we'll be in May, and everybody will be playing.
For sure, yeah, and we'll probably do a much deeper dive into League One in a couple of weeks. But looks like it's going to be a busy spring, Jason. We're going to have 2 pro teams to follow, and then an expanded League One. So it's going to be a very busy couple of months for us.
Definitely.
Hi, this is Grace Doherty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Okay, to wrap things up for tonight, we wanted to revisit the Canada U17 women that were in the CONCACAF Championship. The third and final match was played, and good result for Canada.
Yeah, they won 3-2 over Puerto Rico, and Kaylee Hunter scored again, and it was a winning goal in that game. So Canada won a perfect 3-for-3, and as a result qualifies for the U17 Women's World Cup in Morocco, which is happening in mid-October.
Yeah, I thought this was a little bit weird that, they're having the CONCACAF Championship, but there's no championship match.
Yeah.
Like, all that basically happened is they play the different groups, and the winners of the groups that qualified for the World Cup, that's it. We're done. They didn't play any kind of quarterfinal, semifinal, or whatever. But so be it. At the end of the day, I guess really the real prize is to make it to the World Cup. So good for Canada, and we'll be paying attention to those matches for sure.
A few other things we wanted to touch on, Jason. You learned that Naima Ingleton, who's from Calgary and attends West Virginia University, she's been called up to Jamaica's women's national team, which is pretty great.
Yeah, I think that she's actually even already appeared in her first match. So yeah, congrats to her. That was something I just happened to run across on Instagram actually, and yeah, sort of checked it out.
But no, I think she was. I believe she played for Foothills and has played for like Alberta at the Canada Summer Games and things like that. So she appears to be having a strong career in the NCAA with West Virginia, and getting called up to Jamaica. That's a phenomenal achievement.
Mm-hmm. So Scott, you know that I love futsal, and I have to bring this up. Canadian Futsal Nationals are this weekend. The last couple of years they were out at Seven Chiefs here locally, and but this year they're in Regina. So and for the Alberta representatives, the men's team is from Edmonton, but the women's team is from Calgary. It's Imperial WFC.
Yeah, and they won Calgary's regular futsal season. They dominated it. Hey, they went 12-0 and had a goal differential of plus 44, and then they went on to win provincials at the end of March. But they're facing some tough competition in Saskatchewan this weekend.
We're recording this on Thursday evening. Their first match was this afternoon, and the Saskatoon Impact, the Saskatchewan representatives, they did not show any home province hospitality to them. They beat them 14-3.
Yeah, so that's quite the way to kick off your national tournament. But they do have another game coming up Friday morning. Maybe by the time most people have listened to this, they'll have already played. But that'll be against Windsor from Ontario, and that match is actually available to watch via FIFA Plus.
Have you checked out FIFA Plus yet, Scott? I think it's actually a pretty interesting app. I didn't know much about it, but I actually checked it out because I found out that they're going to be showing some of those New Zealand matches that, there's some Canadian players that are involved in the New Zealand league. So I signed up for the free account, and there are about 1 million games on there from every league you could possibly think of. You want to watch games from, like, I don't know, I'm just making this one up, like the Ugandan league in Africa. Like, there are games on there from everywhere. And anyway, all of these matches for the Canadian Futsal Championships they're all going to be streamed on there, and they're also available on demand after the game.
Right. Yeah, I just pulled up their website, and it's quite the list of things you can watch. For instance, they've got the FIFA Beach Soccer World Cup taking place in France. They've got the U17 Africa Cup of Nations here. They've got the Algerian Cup, the Arkema Premier League. I don't even know what that is, but yeah, this is. I might have to do a little bit of browsing of this website. This is kind of an interesting one. It's called FIFA Plus, or plus.fifa.com.
Anyway, if you're so inclined, the matches will be on there. On Saturday will be the third match of the round robin, and on Sunday the finals will happen. So good luck, and hopefully they can bounce back tomorrow against Windsor. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links on our website on how to buy Scott's book online. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media such as Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.